Just a question about your audience, Lori. Did you have a mix of therapists and non-therapists, or did you find that like we were the ones that were like soaking up the your words and your book?
It's so interesting because I think therapists found it later, which was not what we expected. In fact, the reason that people did not want to buy it is because they said the only people who will read this are therapists, and it turns out that no, we had trouble raising awareness to the therapeutic community. Like therapists had not heard of it, so it went out sort of in this very general way. We had no publicity lined up. People would not cover it. The only thing that I got, and I was like a bulldog with this, I said, we have to get fresh air. We have to get fresh air because I need to have a long form conversation. This isn't the kind of book that you can describe in your 4-minute segment on the Today Show. Like we have to get a long conversation that people will listen to. And of course, that's not an easy thing, getting fresh air. So it's kind of a joke. It's like I have to, fly to the moon. But that was literally the only piece of publicity that we had. We had nothing else. No one would touch it. And Terry Gross, to her credit, did. And before our conversation, so you're sitting there in studio and you're in a totally different location than she is, a totally different city. And I've been listening to Fresh Air my whole adult life. And it was very funny because she introduces herself and she says, so my name's Terry Gross and I have this interview show. And I'm like, Terry, I know who you are. And she's like, well, some people come on the show and they don't, which just astounded me. But she also said, I want to let you know before we start recording that I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy for years. I love it. I may or may not bring it up, but I just want to give you that context. And I almost started crying, like sitting there in studio, that here we are. In every interview I did for this book, people would say, like, I'm in therapy. And then they would bring it up. And she did bring it up in the interview. And so I think that was really important in getting the general public, but for whatever reason, therapists kind of heard about it through their friends who were not therapists, because everyone would say to their friends who are therapists, hey, you're a therapist, you should read this. And then the therapists started hearing about it. And therapists also heard about it because their clients would bring it into the therapy room and say, I read this book, and they would want to discuss it with their therapist. And then their therapist would say, oh, I've never heard of that. Let me read that book. So that was how therapists heard about it. So now I would say it's a mix, but in the beginning, it was very much not the therapeutic community. And I'm really glad that the therapeutic community has found it, because I feel like it's a conversation amongst colleagues with all of us. And also I think it's interesting. A lot of therapists have written to me and said, somebody came into my office, and I get this story a lot. Someone came into my office with your book and they were mentioning the part where you ask Wendell if he likes you, but they didn't want to ask me directly if I liked them. So they would just bring up that part and I would know that they were trying to ask me that question too.